Okay, this is very bad news for the men of UK. Digital safety legislation in UK and EU. We all know by now that safety is used as excuse to silence men's voices. Now let's hear what's going on with these guys.
The legislation. So in the United Kingdom, it's the online safety bill, and in the EU, the Digital Service Act that actually put pressure on digital platforms to, among other things, filter out hate speech and filter out misinformation, right?
Now, hate speech would be MRAs, any guy who wants to defend himself, right? And misinformation. The UK is feminist run. So their misinformation, their lies against men will be allowed to get through. Men correcting that misinformation will be considered misinformation. That's how it's going to work. They're going to criminalize men's voices.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, let's start with in the UK, the Online Safety Bill, which is about to become law. It's not law yet, but it's going to receive royal assent.
Yeah, it's going to become law. And then these guys will not be able to speak their minds.
Very soon, and then it will become law. And it's a very big piece of legislation. And I think to me, it's terrifyingly vague. No one knows really what it means in practice.
Yes, actually, we do know what it's going to mean in practice because we've already seen what's coming. It's vague so that they can make anything a man says criminal and any hate speech women give as good. That's what's going on. That's what's going to happen. So these guys know what's coming. So.
But let me just give you a little example of what it says. So part 10, communications offences. A person commits an offence. This is a criminal offence. If a person sends...
Criminal offence. So in other words, you can be jailed over defending yourself as a man.
Another person a message, and that message conveys information that the person knows to be false, and the person has no reasonable excuse for sending the message. Now, it's important to understand, it's not just, someone sending a text to someone else. When they define message, this means anything, any type of communication that's online. So this would affect...
So in other words, even if this is a private communication, right? So you could be shooting the breeze with your friends and be jailed over that. It's totally silence a man, right?
Search engines, they're sending messages. It's not just individuals. And of course, online...
Search engines. So if you have a search engine that is against Me Too, for example, they can shut them down and arrest people. So they're going to tell, the government is going to tell these search engines to become 100% feminist. That's hate movement.
Providers, whether that's X or Facebook or Rumble or YouTube or anyone sending a message is committing an offense if there's information that's false in it. Now, this is quite incredible.
Wait, just for a second. Does this mean that this passage in that bill actually criminalizes lying? Because we are usually allowed life to lie. This is not something that government said you're not allowed to do unless you're under oath. I mean, if I want to tell an untruth, until now it has been my right to tell an untruth. But if I do this online in the UK, I am criminally liable.
Now, do you guys believe this isn't going to be centered on certain people and other people are going to get away with it? Do you think when feminists get on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, and spew their feminist misinformation that any of these women are going to get jailed? Of course they're not.
Yeah, well, it's worse than that. I mean, it doesn't use the word lying, although I mean, this is the problem. This hasn't been tested in the courts, and there's no one knows what it means. It's horribly vague.
I know what it means. It is vague on purpose, so that anything a guy says can be classified as hate speech or a lie or misinformation, right? These guys know what's going on.
Terrifyingly vague. But yes, it does criminalize lying. It criminalizes anyone sending any type of communication to anyone that they know to be false. Well, how do we know they know that it's false? And who gets to decide what's false?
Well, obviously the powers that be, right? And the powers that be in the UK are feminist controlled. So the British government is controlled by a hate movement. These guys can't see what's coming. Come on.
And even if they know, why would that be I mean, why is it a crime? I mean, lying is lying, but it has not been a crime so far, unless
Well, it is now, dude, for you.
You're under oath.
Well, as I keep saying, it's much worse than this, because it doesn't distinguish anywhere in here between a fact and an opinion. We'll talk about this in just a minute. Because this again is something I talk about at length in the book, Truthophobia, and the way that, Victorian liberal journalism was very, 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 very strict about the distinction between facts and opinions. And it was what I call boomer journalism. Modern journalism has really erased that distinction and led to a situation where we just have narratives, which are either ethically politically good or ethically politically bad. But look, we digress. Let's get back to the online safety bill. The very next section, this is section 181, which follows section 180. This lists exemptions from offences. Okay, so these people...
See what I mean, guys? There's going to be exemptions, right? And who do you think is going to get exempt, right?
People are going to be exempt from that law. A recognised news publisher cannot commit an offence under section 180.
So in other words, the BBC, the feminist BBC that spews hatred towards men all the time, they're going to be allowed to lie their asses off. And any small-time guys like this who might buck the system, they'll be considered criminals and they'll be thrown behind bars.
So, I mean, this is quite...
And I can't stand this guy's reaction. This is not funny. Dude, what's your name? Pascal, Neutrality Studies? This is not funny.
Quite astonishing, isn't it? Because what I write about in my book, and what I'm sure a lot of your listeners will be aware of, is this distinction between what I call it official journalism and unofficial journalism. You, Pascal, are unofficial journalism. The BBC, and they're specifically exempt in section 56, a recognised news publisher, and it says the BBC, and it has a whole list, of definitions.
Yeah, so BBC can lie its ass off, and you can't do anything about it. It's that simple. So if they want to target some guy, and it'll always be a guy, they'll zap you. And there's nothing you'll be able to do about it. And the thing is, this guy's selling books, and they're talking about it. This has to go beyond talk by now. These guys should be political activists because they can see their rights being stripped from them in their own country.
The BBC and recognized news publishers are officially allowed to say untruths, knowing that they're not true. That they're not true.
Exactly. They're allowed to lie. The man-haters are allowed to lie.
Yeah, section 56, a recognised news publisher is part 1A, and the example is the British Broadcasting Corporation. And there's a whole load of other examples, but what they're trying to do is what I write about in the book is this distinction between official journalism, what a lot of people call the mainstream media, they're exempt, and unofficial journalism, you, Pascal, and hundreds and indeed thousands of bloggers, which are
so this is not going to be a proper law at all. You see, it's strictly to attack the male citizenry.
Sources of alternative opinions, alternative facts, which are done by responsible, educated, intelligent people, that's potentially criminal. So, for example, if you're in the UK, do you have, this is section C, do you have, Pascal, for your YouTube channel, do you have a standards code? Show me your standards code, Pascal. No, you haven't got one. Well, you're in trouble. Well, you're in trouble then, because there's a whole list here of you know, they're trying to define what in a kind of official journalism is. But there's one other thing, you know, which I think is really important. I've not seen this publicized anywhere, but section 7 of the bill sets up, it gives huge powers to Ofcom, which is the regulator in the UK. And it tells Ofcom they've got to set up immediately a new advisory committee on disinformation and misinformation.
This is 1984 all over again, or for real in this case, I should be saying, right? What is that called? I don't want to screw it up. It's the Ministry of Truth. It's basically that.
Now, that's fascinating, and it's something also that the EU Digital Services Act does, because that is Orwell's Ministry of Truth. Ofcom are going to be told to set up a new committee to basically advise and rule on what is true and what is false and what is legal and what is illegal. And yeah, it's quite terrifying, isn't it? You know, we're going to have very...
Can I point something out to you guys? Do you think this will stop Me Too? So, I mean, they're talking about corporations, you know, or you know, the official media, but you don't think the average female citizen can boldly lie about a man? I bet they'll allow it.
Very terrifying. This is, I mean, we are going down the drains very, very, very fast here, and I didn't think it would come this quickly.
Yeah, notice he's right about that. He actually could see this coming, but it is accelerating. The UK is a feminist shithole, and it's your men's fault for allowing this to happen.
This is extremely scary. We now are, I mean, as soon as this is law, any blogger, any YouTuber is under constant danger of being singled out as a spreader of misinformation. And if in a court he's accused or she's accused of doing...
He, not she. It's going to be men, and you know it.
So knowingly, then that's it. You're behind bars or whatever it is.
Also, they can't, how would they claim knowingly, right? What if you actually believe in your own horseshit? How could they prove it? All they have to do is claim it and you're guilty.
Yeah, well, there are huge financial penalties. And Ofcom is also, I think, you know, may have the power to block certain channels and so on if necessary. But what interests me, and this is something again I write about in the book Truthophobia, is what is truth and the way truth changed. By truth, what I'm talking about is journalistic truth, or the idea of legitimate knowledge.
Oh, by the way, certain PCMC members live in the UK, right? I mean, this is the kind of trouble we're heading for.
And it used to...
And whatever happens to the UK, and it's happened like crazy in Spain, in India, you think that's not going to branch off to the rest of the world? So here I am in Canada. Eventually, Canadians are very geared to Britain. You think we won't follow suit eventually?
To be with the Enlightenment, the idea was you couldn't possibly know the truth unless you heard both sides. That they would have laughed, the Victorians would have laughed, and they would have been, I think, horrified to see what we're doing now, because they would have said, you can't know what's false. John Stuart Mill would have roared with laughter. He would have said, you can't know what's true or false unless you hear both sides of the argument, unless...
Exactly. And MRAs are silenced. Those are the guys fighting for your rights that you're losing. You guys who can't look at women in the train station anymore, right? So you two are going to be very, very affected by this.
You hear the evidence for and against, and it's for individuals to make up their minds. And the Victorians would have stressed, well, what's a fact and what's opinion? The Act doesn't distinguish. It just says,
Exactly. It's going to be whatever they say it is. That's right. You know what's coming.
Communication that's false. Well, if you have an opinion about something, is that now going to be criminalized?
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. So if some woman gets on the internet with a mug of I drink male tears and spews hatred and you fight back, you'll be considered a criminal.
It sounds like it is. Opinions are going to be true or false, perhaps. But, it's the vagueness. We don't know how this is going to play out, Pascal.
Yes, you do. You know exactly how it's going to play out for you. And that's why you're scared. And you know why it's vague. So they call anything they don't like, they'll call hate speech. Anything they do like, they'll say that's truth. That's positive information.
I'm not trying to be overly alarmist, but
well, then that's your issue, dude. Overly alarmist. You see them, you admit what they're doing, and that it's going to become a reality. This is the time to be alarmed. You know why these guys aren't alarmed? Because they know they're being attacked as men in their heart of hearts. And men take it like little bitches every time.
I think if you give huge sweeping powers to the state, history tells us it doesn't end well.
Yeah, and especially if the only institutions that are exempt from this rule are the ones that we know that lied to us several times in the past when it really mattered. I just recall everybody that the UK was buddy-buddy, side by side with the United States to attack Iraq and do a horrible war, a really, really disgusting war. And that the same was then true again with Libya. This is where my international relations spiel comes in, right? And the newspapers have...
But dude, Pascal, this goes beyond, external countries. This is coming to you personally as a human being. You are a man, your voice will be silenced because you are a man. Doesn't get any more personal than that.
Have been at the forefront of all of this warmongering and also of the fear mongering, right? And of the whole, even the Russia gating and so on. And these were horrible big untruths. And these institutions themselves that have been pivotal in the past to guide public opinion in order to allow most...
Well, this is the thing though. You can avoid talking about the Iraq war, or in this case, the Ukraine war, right? You could avoid talking about those things and go about your life. You guys cannot go about your life when you're being attacked as individuals, can you?
Horrible, like state power, the power to make war, to be exercised. Those are the ones that are excluded from from having to be truthful. I don't think it can get any more Orwellian at this point.
Oh, I think it can, and
Really?
I fear that it will. I know you wanted me to mention.
Thank you. This guy's right. Thank you, Graham.
Mention the EU, the European equivalent, which is the Digital Services Act, and I won't go into the detail of it, but they're perhaps targeting what they refer to as very large online platforms. So it would appear that piece of legislation is particularly geared towards X, Elon Musk's X platform, or Facebook or YouTube. Those,
yeah, they go to the massive platforms they know everybody is on, and that's how they'll silence our voices.
Big platforms appear to be what they're targeting. And
you think that Elon Musk won't fold when they're actually pushing for jail time for him? Right. He will do whatever they tell him to.
They talk in the Digital Services Act as they recognize what they refer to as trusted flaggers, and it is going to be the role of trusted flaggers to flag up what is hateful, what is misinformation, what is disinformation.
So a bunch of feminist women will be granted these flags, and they'll be going on and just striking men's voices down and perhaps pointing at a man and saying, put him behind bars.
So it's very, very much the same, isn't it? If we look, suddenly we see it's almost a parallel with the UK legislation, where Ofcom has got to set itself up as a committee to rule on what is true. Well, we're getting that, and going to get that in European countries. The trusted flaggers will be the arbiters of what is true and what is false. And online providers, let's say X, will be told you've got to block material that's hateful or disinformation. Who gets
MRA speech, or just men in general defending themselves as a gender? That's what will happen.
to decide? Well, the trusted flaggers will decide. And it's very weird. All of this is happening at the same time, isn't it? And
if you want to, just to prove my point, go to anywhere in Reddit and start talking about men's issues on almost any Reddit, even Reddits that have nothing to do with politics. You'll get banned because Reddit has feminist flaggers in it. So they're taking that model and they're going to put it to the major platforms.
I also came across this. I pulled this off the internet. This is from the United Nations from this year. Information integrity on digital platforms, our common agenda, policy brief number 8 from the United Nations. And so this is current as well. And it talks about this concept of information integrity. And they say information integrity refers to the accuracy, consistency, and reliability of information. It is threatened by disinformation, misinformation, and hate speech. And it says there is
no hate speech is the one you got to worry about, because hate speech will be any man just joking around with sexual innuendo. It'll be any guy standing up for himself as a gender, any man dispelling the misinformation of feminist hate speech. He'll be considered giving hate speech, and that's what they'll classify this as.
No universally accepted definitions of these terms, but UN entities are developing working definitions. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's saying that, speech we don't want, we're going to label it misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech. And the UN there is saying,
the UN is feminist run. The UN has been known to give aid strictly to women and supposedly children over men. You guys do know that, right? Anyone who's new listening, you do realize that, right?
These things are not.
So do you think the UN is going to be fair between the genders when people are giving information or giving their opinions?
Universally understood. There's a great quote, slightly disturbing quote, perhaps right at the end of it. And it says, the era of Silicon Valley's move fast and break things philosophy must be brought to a close. It is essential that safety by design is integrated into all new technologies and products.
Safety is code word for we are going to shut you down for saying stuff we don't like. So let me show you something quick. When female criminals are caught and the police go to arrest them, they'll say, I don't feel safe. Don't come near me. Don't touch me. I don't feel safe. See, it's used as a defense when women are committing crimes. Exactly. Just watch like police body cams and you'll see it all the time. Okay. So safety is always going to be used by the female body, citizen body, to attack the males in their country.
at the outset. So again, we've got the same thing. We've got this kind of vagueness, and we've got a desire to impose forms of censorship. And we've seen censorship before, historically. And that's the way I see it, Pascal. To me, it's something is ending, and we're actually going back to a dark period of history. I've got a couple of other.
That's right. You guys have to, people have to fight corruption on a constant basis. This is where complacency leads to.
Things just to...
And men have been complacent for generations. And that's why the British Isles has become this feminist cesspool.
Just to read out to you, this is from the year 1662, when Charles II introduced censorship in England, and he required all printed materials to be...
No, this is not that important. Okay, this is important.
And I want you to tell me, your listeners can guess, tell me where this was.
No, sorry, got to back it up a bit.
A couple of sentences. This is from a piece of legislation which was introduced to protect people from hate speech, and it was to regulate journalism. I want you to tell me, your listeners can guess, tell me where this was from. Quote, editors must treat their subjects truthfully. Editors must keep out of the newspapers anything which is misleading, offends the religious sentiments of others, or offends a person's welfare, harms their reputation, or makes them appear ridiculous or contemptible. Unquote. Where's that from?
Monty Python.
Sorry?
Monty Python?
No, I mean, it's phrased, isn't it? It sounds very kind and praised. It's section 13 of the editorial law introduced by Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany on the 4th of October, 1933.
Exactly. It was done by Hitler, and now it's done by feminist Britain. Because feminists are a hate movement. Feminism is a hate movement. Just like the Nazis. The only difference is that, besides being about gender, is the fact that this hate movement has been allowed to flourish.
But
well done.
The language is always the same. We're here to protect you, but once you give power to people in authority, power, as Lord Acton famously said, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. We don't know how this is going to play out, Pascal.
Yes, you do. Because I can see it coming from miles.
I'm sure there'll be another voice. Someone would object to what I'm saying and say, you're an alarmist. This is actually, it's okay. But we don't know how this is going to play out. But we're giving tremendous power to our rulers, and
not just your rulers, to a feminist hate movement who hates your guts because of the way you were born.
I see the future with some foreboding.
No, the only way that this can play out without tears is if it's struck down by the courts. That's I don't see another way.
Well, you guys should be getting on it, shouldn't you? As men, you should be fighting as protesters on a political level against this. Men do this all the time when they know that they're the ones getting attacked. They just hope someone comes to the rescue instead of doing something about it.
If this is law, and if this is going to be the rule from now on, as you just very correctly made analogies between this current language of these two laws in Britain and in the EU, with acts of 1662 in the UK under the monarchy, and even with Nazi Germany. This is a correct analogy, and what these things do is they don't keep us, the citizens, safe. They keep the government safe from us. They keep the ruling class safe.
Well, not just the ruling class. Well, I should say, yes, the ruling class, but the ruling class is the average female citizen in your country. Remember, you have no staring laws for men against women in your train stations. So the ruling class is the female portion of Britain.
And comfortable, because they're the ones who get to decide what tickles down to the peasants and what doesn't. So the peasants don't take the forks and actually demand something that they have a right to.
Good analogy. The men of Britain are the peasants, and the women of Britain are the nobility. I agree.
And I'm not advocating for violence. I mean, the only thing we can do is nonviolent protest against this. Never ever do violence, because you lose the second you start it.
Of course.
Because otherwise this is already hate speech, right? And would have to be banned. And I'm afraid, because YouTube now and the others and so on, you know, this by now it's enough to have an allegation in order to be already deemed to have transgressed and then be outcasted.
So your speech has already been curbed already, right? Like, that means there's a difference between saying you should do this act of violence and saying something like, I would love to slap that person for what they said. Those are two different things. And yet you don't have the right to say that. See, that's wrong.
Graham, you have experience in journalism and in the UK. This is new, right? This is not something that just, you know, has been there 15, 20 years ago. We just didn't notice, and now it just got a new name. This is actually a new development, isn't it?
Actually, you guys are wrong. The feminist hate movement has been around for generations and has been working behind the scenes for generations. It isn't new. It's only new to you because the disease has got to the point that the symptoms are showing up.
Well, it's completely new. Yeah, I mean, I think as someone who worked in British journalism, you know, we were always very proud of the fact we were free to say whatever we like. There was growing self-censorship, you know, but no, I think it is sad. You know, when I was a child, my mother took me to Speaker's Corner in London. I don't know if you're familiar with that, or your viewers are familiar. It's a little tiny little square.
Yeah, they're just going to talk about how Speaker's Corner let everyone talk and everyone shut their business, etc. Exactly. And I'm going to skip this because, you know something, guys, this kind of talk is useless. This is a time for action. Right now, they're doing begging talk. There was a Speaker's Corner and everyone could just talk and say crazy things and they were all right. So what? If you want that protected, you've got to get off your asses and do something about it. And that's how we're ending this video.